Hello.
Our story begins with a shuttle landing on Dathomir. Savage had saved his brother. They hadn't made themselves known to the galaxy, and yet Maul wanted to come home. Savage had found his brother sooner and brought him back to Dathomir in between Asajj Ventress' assassination attempt on Dooku. The former sister and her assassin did not interact, due to not being near each other on their separate arrivals. Maul had been healed by Talzin immediately, and as they started out into the galaxy for their revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi, Maul sensed a disturbance in the Force, one in which his home was in danger. The two Zabrak warriors landed in the forest. They came from the opposite side of the planet, so they never saw the Separatist fleet outside of orbit. Once the door in their shuttle opened, Maul hissed, and told Savage that their home was under attack. The disturbance Maul sensed, or the foresight he had, of what was to come, is why they were here. They ran down the ramp, with Savage following closely behind his brother. At this point in the battle, the undead Night Sisters hadn't been fully raised by old Daka and Mother Talzin, but it was a trick that they were working on at the moment. The two elders of the clan were doing their ritual to raise the dead. Above, and in the mountain range outside the battle, the mother of Singing Mountain clan watched in sadness. The loss of the Night Sisters would upset the cosmic balance of Dathomir for good. Inside the forests, two red saber staffs cut through various battle droid types, who placed themselves across this assault. Just as the brothers entered the fray, not far from them, a Night Sister was in danger. Asajj Ventress was making her assault on General Grievous, and holding him up outside of their ship. The undead were now covering the forest, and the battle droids were being pushed back. But Grievous didn't play fair, utilizing his battle droids to take advantage of his own foolish loss to a former ally. Asajj was saved by one of her sisters, by being pulled away from the droid general's blades. He laughed maniacally, as the Night Sisters who so valiantly took command of the battlefield were defeated by their honor in combat. Though the dishonor Grievous showed would come back to bite him, as he watched two other red lightsabers bob in the distance. Maul and Savage offered the Night Sisters a chance to form a line over and around some naturally placed tree bridges and trenches. Asajj could also be hidden behind one of these trees as their allies took care of her. Just beyond them, Savage used his hulking strength to disperse battle droids, and Maul's skill with the lightsaber aided him in taking out commando droids. But then, their true opponent showed himself for the first time. General Grievous cut down 3 or 4 zombified Night Sisters before crushing the back of an injured, living sister. He cut her head off before looking at the two figures he had never met, nor ever heard of before. Savage wasn't known about to him, because his campaigns were far more important than whatever Dooku was doing with his assassins. Grievous rolled his 2 sabers, and Maul, without even giving a chance for introduction, dove in. Savage was a little preoccupied at the moment, but he eventually followed suit and attempted to help his brother. Grievous' cybernetics provided him the perfect counter to every single move that the Zabrak warriors made. He was a fierce warrior, and despite having just lost to Ventress moments before, he held his own here. In a weird way, Savage and Maul disrupted the flow of each other in their own assaults. Most of this came from the inexperience that Savage wielded. He wasn't nearly as prepared as his brother was for this type of engagement, and another side effect was they weren't trained enough with each other to play off the other's strengths, as brothers shouldn't. Maul led the way though, and Grievous, who grew more impatient with each passing second, especially due to his stagnating assault, ignited 2 more lightsabers. Savage was nearly impaled by this, and Maul told his brother to stay back. Grievous wielded his sabers in a circular motion as they almost ripped through Savage's body. The two of them weren't in the best place of their own journeys as saber duelists anyways. Maul was fresh off of his insane 11-year expedition under a heap of trash, and Savage had no true master to train him. He didn't even consider Asajj's presence, or if she was defending the Night Sisters. All Savage knew was his instinctual pull to defend the people of his system, no matter his thoughts on the Night Sisters or Ventress. The destruction of the Night Sisters meant terror and pain for everyone else on this planet. Not far from them, Morgan Elsbeth and her mother led a counter-assault against the droids. This would aid the Night Sisters in taking advantage over their combative nemesis. The battle droids were unstoppable in formation, but the trees and the failing assault led by Grievous made them easier to pick off in the tree line. Ventress would soon lead her own counter, with Maul and Savage holding the middle of the battlefield where Grievous was. Night Sisters fired their arrows across the trees and took out battle droids, providing covering support for the 2 Zabrak brothers who continued to duel. Maul's muscle memory was kicking in, but even he was struggling. His new metallic legs didn't provide much secure balance, and his brother's flimsy fighting style created a barrier in which they might not find victory. This inexperience, while making Grievous's attacks easier to win, gave him an alternative immense struggle. Thanks in part to Maul finding himself through the blade once more, and Savage's raw abilities, there were a lot of non-uniform strikes. In a similar fashion to how Kit Fisto's Form 1 defeated Grievous, these two combatants were essentially doing the same thing, but they weren't using Form 1. Savage was just swinging, and Maul was floating between Forms 4 and 6, because he wasn't on the footing that made him Palpatine's prided student. Their weapons continued to slash and clash. Grievous overpowered Maul before Savage shredded through two of Grievous's arms, but the droid general crushed his saber down on Savage's back, and just as he prepared to decapitate Savage, Maul used the Force to throw Grievous against a tree. In a manner similar to how Satil Shan defeated Darth Malgus, Maul threw his hands forward, accessing bits and pieces of ground, earth, debris, branches, and trees as he launched wave after wave of pressure on the Grievous's body. The droid general wheezed and panicked until a log hit him with so much pressure that they both broke through the tree Grievous's back was against. The droid general rolled across the ground and came to a stiff halt on the other side of the broken tree. He coughed heavily, but Maul did not pursue this kill. He helped his brother up, holding his arm over his shoulder and giving him the leverage to walk. Asajj, who by this point started the counter-assault, saw these two by accident. She was rallying everyone for a push against the droid control ship. Seeing Savage made her angry, so she went to kill the zabrak that betrayed her and ruined her chances to kill Dooku. As she trekked across the battlefield, ripping through battle droids along the way, she found Grievous disarmed on the ground. The former Kalesh warrior tried to stand his ground or find something to fight back with, but Maul continued to lay pressure on him with the Force. When Asajj's crimson saber stopped at the edge of the tree line where the two brothers stood, she realized what they had done. Her original intentions had faded from existence, and she saw a chance to end part of the war right here. This could be her first step in revenge against Dooku. Then she realized that Maul had somehow returned. She couldn't believe her eyes, because she knew about him for the longest time, and yet here he was, alive, again. Maul left Savage on a tree where he used it to hold himself up. Asajj and he locked eyes, but didn't show any sense of resentment towards each other. This moment, this assault had given them everything to hate, and in seeing that, they realized that they weren't the real enemy. Maul, on the other hand, pressed his saber staff into the ground and walked closer to Grievous. The droid general cried out but was silenced almost immediately afterwards. Asajj smiled menacingly and welcomed Maul home. He looked to her, referring to Ventress as sister, and told her that they would crush these foolish separatists. She looked to Savage and then nodded to Maul before turning on a heel and returning to her counter. Before Savage and Maul could get involved in the conflict again, the counters led by Morgan Elsbeth and Talia were successful. With their assault was Marin, Trez Norez, and Rose Lai. It was only a temporary victory, and everyone on Dathomir knew that. Once the battle droids were slaughtered, Mother Talzin brought all of her children into the caves. They laid the dead to rest, and they began the process for healing the injured. Old Daka and Talzin would take care of that. In the meantime, while Savage was with the wounded, Maul and Asajj would get to know each other. The Night Sister and Night Brother never met. He was only 4 years older than her, so she would have been too young to remember him before he was taken by Sidious. They spoke briefly about their own interactions with the Sith. Maul was very unfamiliar with the new galaxy, and he only knew of the little plans his master actually shared with him before his defeat. Asajj was very impatient with this line of questioning, but she saw the potential for an alliance. She knew trying to manipulate Maul into an apprentice situation would never work, like it did temporarily with Savage. So instead, she suggested that they get revenge on Sidious together. Obviously, fighting that Sith Lord would be impossible for them alone, but Dooku might be a tangible foe to defeat. Maul had much training to complete before ever hoping to go toe-to-toe with the generational duelist that was Tyrannus. He was barely comfortable in his new legs, let alone using his saber for the first time since Kenobi defeated him. The thing is, Maul was initially going to leave Dathomir after his much earlier healing ceremony to find Kenobi and torture his soul. If it wasn't for his own incredible foresight, chances are Dathomir would have been lost, and now Maul would put his gripe with Obi-Wan aside, so that he could help the Night Sisters and their planet remain free from the Sith. A conversation about Kenobi did come up between the two of them, and while Ventress was familiarized with his infamous defeat at Naboo, she didn't believe chasing Obi-Wan was worth his time. She of course had her own issues with Kenobi, but she at least came to respect him as a rival combatant. Also, not for nothing, Maul wouldn't dream of getting close to him without first interacting with Anakin and his pet, Ahsoka. These were names that came and went in passing as Asajj described the current status of the galaxy to her new ally. Maul understood the game they were playing here, but as children of Dathomir, they would work together, respect each other, and maintain stability until they got what they both wanted. Asajj wasn't very concerned with hunting down Obi-Wan, she just wanted the Sith to pay. This so happened to be mutually beneficial for both of them, which is why their alliance would be formed. Without Maul's hatred towards Sidious for abandoning him, and Tyrannus for replacing him, then they probably wouldn't find such a connection. Mother Talzin and Old Daka worked tirelessly to prepare everything for the dead and take care of the wounded, but they would accomplish everything. However, even though these children wanted their revenge, Talzin and Old Daka had other ideas. Both of them were even more pissed off about the entire situation than the young of their tribe could ever be. Talzin walked away from the coven and brought Asajj, Maul, and Savage with her. She walked amongst the sacred grounds of their home and spoke empathetically that they were the greatest warriors on Dathomir at the moment. Their skills and their positions across the stars, their experiences with the Sith, would need to be utilized for the next step of their own endeavors. Talzin knew that this attack, whether intended or not from Sidious, was a sign from the Sith that they could not coexist in a galaxy belonging to the Sith. No longer could Palpatine's rise go unchecked or unchallenged. She was willing to allow the Sith a chance to rise in the galaxy, provided they received amnesty and protection in the form of solitude from the events that would transform the galactic political landscape. This act by Tyrannus, whether encouraged by his master or not, was a fact that the Night Sister clan could no longer blissfully ignore. She told them that Talia was leading the least wounded Night Sisters across the planet to form a blood truce with the Night Brothers. They weren't technologically advanced enough to wage war, but they were going to unify Dathomir, so that, in the case the Sith did return, they would be cut down and destroyed. All, of course, as Talzin slyly spoke her words like a snake, so that the Night Sisters may remain dominant on Dathomir. None of the three followers found this to be a surprise. Maul and Savage were born and raised within the society. This was their way of life and honor to follow, as would the Night Brothers and Singi Mountain clan when their time came. Talzin expressed that formidable changes would be made to their own individual enhancements, to make them tougher opponents when confronting Dooku. Savage would gain more strength, Maul's legs would be transformed into more stable assets, Ventress's sabers would be given the touch of Talzin, making them a poison for anyone grazed by their grace. She explained to them that they'd have a week to prepare themselves and adjust to these current transformations. Her eyes then drifted to Maul, telling her beloved son that it was time to let go of his focus on Kenobi. It would only lead him to unforeseeable grief and suffering. This was a chilling reminder of the understanding Talzin and Old Daka had of the Force and of the future. Maul's own foresight had grown since being Palpatine's student, and it would continue to advance with more practice. For now though, if he wished to avoid a tragic downfall, one where he would constantly roll his own stone up a hill, then he could ascend higher than Palpatine ever foresaw. He was, prior to his loss on Naboo, the most gifted zabrak on their planet. Now he would need to hone everything he was to have a chance at aiding his brother and sister in defeating Tyrannus. The slight modifications for the trio would be made. In the meantime, the Night Sisters would heal themselves and formally unify with the various clans around Dathomir. Old Daka, who usually remained hidden in her cave, was escorted across the planet to visit the others. This rallied Dathomir unlike ever before seen in their planetary history. Asajj, Maul, and Savage, inversely, trained relentlessly. They had 7 days before they left. The first 6 would be of preparation, unification, and fixation on their common goal. On the last day, they would join the clans of Dathomir in a feast. Whether this was set to be the end of their people or the beginning of a new era of unity, they did not know. It was a celebration of their history, their art, their powers, their culture, and the sacrifice this trio were preparing to make for their kind. Across the stars, the Sith, after learning about Grievous's demise, were quite unenthused. Tyrannus proposed to his master that they send a larger division, and he'd go himself to accompany them. Sidious denied this. He had other intentions. He hadn't initially considered wiping out the Dathomiri until he had his empire, but he would instead utilize the Jedi for this operation. Losing Grievous would be crushing for the Separatist Senate's war morale. It also might elicit reactions from the Republic to take pressure off the gas and coast towards victory over the CIS, which could remove potential power from Palpatine's hands. He didn't have full answers on any of this because the Senate planned to convene at the end of the week to discuss Grievous's demise. Tyrannus was the first to learn about it before informing his master. The Republic accidentally found out about it, thanks to Quinlan Vos. But after the death was confirmed by ARF troopers who went to Dathomir to see Grievous's hung and decapitated body, they informed High Command of the truth. Sidious informed his student to remain vigilant. The Night Sisters might attempt revenge. When the call ended, he would understand why his master gave him this warning. With the Republic and CIS preparing for their own responses to Grievous's death, another wrinkle was being added to the mix. A task force of Jedi under the command of Mace Windu were being sent to Dathomir by Chancellor Palpatine. He suggested that a threat capable of taking out the general of the Separatist military might be worthy of opposition in this multifaceted conflict. Windu agreed, but not for the same reason Palpatine initially believed. The Master of the Order agreed to take a task force of Jedi to Dathomir. Sidious believed for conflict. Mace was going to make a truce with the Night Sisters. Palpatine hoped that by sending Windu, Old Daka and Mother Talzin could take out the Master of the Order and add the Jedi to a hit list of which the Night Sisters would focus on instead of the Sith. Or, inversely, the Jedi would win. So, at the exact same time, a Republic Counselor-class cruiser landed on Dathomir, and a stolen Separatist shuttle would land on Raxus Secundus, where Tyrannus was currently hiding. The Dathomiri knew of Dooku's current location thanks to an invisible Night Sister who tracked his every movement before he found out about Grievous's defeat. He had no clue he was being watched and followed. When the Jedi exited their cruiser, behind Master Windu, they were immediately confronted by Morgan Elsbeth, who demanded that they leave Dathomir. Mace, a firm believer in diplomacy, laid his weapon on the ground, between the Night Sister Defense Force and the Jedi Task Force, to show his intentions. He could defeat Talzin, because she utilized the dark side so heavily, but he had no intention to wipe another Force sect off the face of the galaxy. Windu believed in the Republic, and he also believed in the Force. If the Senate and its leader were willing to disregard entire populations of people because they were considered a threat, then the problem truly sat at the heart of the Republic, not the Jedi nor the Force. Mother Talzin, due to the stirring between the Jedi and the Sisters, confronted Windu and brought the Jedi Task Force into their cave, gracefully utilizing a diplomacy that Sister Elsbeth had yet to understand. On Raxus Secundus, Dooku could sense a storm coming. He grabbed his saber and ran to the balcony of his hidden estate. No one would know he was here. It was pitch black outside anyways, so he sent commandos to scour the forest for intruders, and they went. He shook his head. Realistically, Dooku hadn't been the same since his first assassination attempt. He was a bit shaken and confused about everything. He wasn't able to sleep properly, and he was paranoid frequently, hence why he came to this estate. Sidious gave him an array of Plagueis-era rituals to coax himself out of this madness. It was weakening him, and due to the lack of sleep, without the same training Palpatine had, he was mentally frustrated and exhausted. This didn't help when 6 lightsabers activated from 3 combatants. Tyrannus slid his curved hilt from his belt and raised his own saber. He watched the individuals and told them that if they were real, then they would die. Maul laughed quietly, telling his replacement that he would understand what it meant to be forgotten. Sabers immediately collided. Despite the dreariness of Dooku's current state, he was still a remarkable duelist. He hadn't collapsed to the will of the dark side imposing itself on his body. His flexibility, movement, and talents were all as poised as they had been when he first left the Order. As he always said, perhaps a little better. Lightsabers shrieked across the halls of the mansion. Commando droids and Magna Guards moved to confront the combatants. Maul and Asajj were the most talented of the 3, and having the easiest time working together, so Savage went to confront the droids. Fighting alongside Maul made Asajj wish she had waited or looked for him sooner. They were almost as dynamic as Obi-Wan and Anakin, without years of knowing each other or training with each other. Their forms played off the others extremely well, and it permitted them to be extremely deadly for Tyrannus. He batted their sabers away with precision, and even almost cut Maul's blade in half. Something everyone forgot during this engagement was the lust for revenge that Tyrannus would have in this moment. Maul was a Sith, who took his beloved Qui-Gon Jinn from him. Maul didn't know about this connection, but Dooku had never forgotten what he could have had, a reality that would have never been due to his misunderstanding of Qui-Gon's true alignment in the Force. Dooku spun between sabers and flung electricity at Maul, who had difficulty defending with his saber staff, and Asajj rushed in. Behind them, Savage was crushing through Magna Guards with his brute strength, while also uneasily defending blaster shots fired at him. On Dathomir, Master Windu contacted the Chancellor. His voice was shaky and uneven. He paused before speaking and wiped what looked to be a tear from his face. Mace told the Chancellor that they were all dead. He and the surviving Jedi killed them all after faking a truce. Every last Dathomiri had been destroyed. He asked if Palpatine would be willing to come and see for himself, and he nodded his head. Mace Windu, a man possessed by duty, honesty, and willingness to uphold Republic values, had done the unthinkable. He led the Jedi assault against the Night Sisters. He betrayed their trust and slaughtered them. His heart was broken. The Republic had truly destroyed everything Windu was. Palpatine's eyes scanned the bodies, and he asked about the Great Mother of the clan. Windu pointed in the direction of the bodies, showing her as the last standing Dathomiri. The sword of Talzin was in her hands, and she stood fighting over the last of their kind. Old Doc had been vanquished before they ever destroyed the Great Mother. Mace told Palpatine that he hoped he was happy with his resolve. These innocents had aided the Republic by killing Grievous. Now their race was forever erased from the galactic map because of him. The Chancellor threw a coat over his shoulders, telling Masameda to prepare his vessel for Dathomir. He then reminded the Master of the Order what the Night Sisters were capable of doing and what they did to Grievous. They were too dangerous to be left alive, reminding Windu that he had just performed a high honor for the Republic. He and his Order should be proud of what they did and accomplished at Dathomir today. Inside the mansion at Raxus Secundus, Maul was launched from his feet and smashed into a pillar, as Master and Apprentice continued their duel. Savage was getting surrounded by more and more Magna Guards. He fought with everything he had, but no longer could he maintain this fight. Savage's knee buckled, and he was electrocuted by a Magna Guard staff. Asajj slipped under a strike and used the Force to push Dooku backwards, but he fired electricity at her, forcing her to form an X with her sabers and defend herself. Maul then lunged down from the ceiling, and Dooku dropped his assault and parried, colliding a saber around his back and pushing Maul away from him. Ventress threw one of her sabers at the Magna Guards, which freed Savage, and she, conversely, joined her brother. Maul and Ventress parried and pressed their assault against the Countess Sereno. He believed in this moment that he was unstoppable. Even without his wits, they were no match for him or his talents. Tyrannus shoved Maul backwards so far that his legs indented the floorboards, before picking Ventress off the ground with the Force and electrocuting her. He laughed at both of them, Maul unable to do anything, and Ventress helpless to resist. But before either of them could meet their fate, the monstrous Savage Opress lunged through Dooku, picking him off the ground and shoving him into the wall. He swung his saber, but even being held off the ground, Dooku reversed his grip and defended himself. Savage swung again and again, before getting cut down the face when he pulled back too far for a swing to kill Dooku. He, as a result of this cut, staggered. Tyrannus jabbed at Opress, but his entire arm was ripped off by Maul's swing, and as Maul rolled across the ground, Ventress thrusted both of her sabers into Dooku and hole-punched him. The Sith apprentice gasped for air when he realized he had lost. He put his remaining hand against the wall, trying to find his balance, and before he could find a peaceful death, Savage ripped his saber up across his body and killed him instantly. The three Dathomiri sighed when Dooku fell to the ground. They had done it, but little did they know what awaited them when they returned to their home world. All of their work was done, now for an unforeseen future. When they exited outside of hyperspace, inside their tiny separatist shuttle, they looked at a Republic system fleet. It was Palpatine's. The Chancellor of the Republic had arrived to investigate the situation. He was already on the ground. This fleet was only here to protect and escort him from the core to this dump in the middle of nowhere. Palpatine's pristine Republic-crafted boots walked across the disgusting, tarnished grounds of Dathomir. The Night Sisters were truly slaughtered. The Jedi had gone through with the ultimate, unthinkable betrayal. Mace wasn't the individual to greet Chancellor Palpatine. He was knelt by Mother Talzin's dead body. He felt terrible about what he had done here. Almost 100 Jedi arrived, and almost none of them would return home. His heart almost couldn't take it. Senate commandos escorted the Chancellor as he arrived, and the surviving Jedi guided him to Windu's location. Palpatine, not knowing of his own apprentice's death across the stars, or the arrival of Maul, Savage, and Ventress, proclaimed this to be a wondrous day, a day of victory for the Republic and its future generations. As he spoke pridefully of their work, he stuttered, and almost immediately bent over, spitting out blood. Palpatine wheezed and gripped his stomach. Windu looked up, another tear falling from his eye, as he watched the Chancellor roll over on the ground and stare up at the skies. Senate commandos quickly got to his side and called for a medic to save his life. The Jedi were also there to aid, but it slowly became too late. Palpatine's heart stopped, and the Sith were all but destroyed in one go. Master Windu immediately requested that they take the Chancellor back to Coruscant for further evaluation. They needed to act quickly. The commandos were confused, but Mace informed them that if the Chancellor was going to support a genocide, then the Jedi would at least bury their dead. It was the least they could do for acting on orders. The Senate commandos didn't pay much attention to this rhetoric, because blood wasn't on their hands. The trio who successfully killed Tyrannus were heartbroken as they watched the Jedi stand above their fallen comrades. The brothers and sister knew that they had to get their revenge here and now, and so, once the Republic fleet picked up and escorted their dead Chancellor back to the core, they made their move. But there was no need. Mother Talzin rose from her perpetual state of lifelessness and placed her hand on Mace's shoulder, thanking him for his courage and his gifts. The three warriors who just ignited their lightsabers were left in confusion. Why were the Night Sisters suddenly alive? Old Daka appeared from behind them, telling her three children to put their weapons down. A new friendship had been formed. Dathomir was forever safe from the hands of the Republic, or the Confederacy, or any other form of government. As they would come to understand, the Jedi upon their landing told the Night Sisters about their purpose here. Mace Windu had a firm loyalty to the Republic, a devotion to a higher society that could take care of the galaxy. He lost all of his faith in that Republic the second Palpatine ordered the complete genocide of an innocent population. Sure, the Republic technically wouldn't be doing it because the Jedi would be, thus leaving their hands clean from such atrocities. It made Windu put into perspective everything the Republic did. The responsibility of this death would fall on those who actually committed the deed. He would not commit that deed. Master Windu and Mother Talzin spoke about these orders, and she revealed the truth about the Chancellor. After learning that the Chancellor was the last Sith Lord, Mace proposed a triumphant Jedi and Night Sister victory, and Talzin, despite her pride, agreed to it. Palpatine did actually die of a heart attack, one that was caused by Mother Talzin, Old Daka, and the mother of Singing Mountain Clan, combining their great powers to curse a single man to damnation. All anyone would ever need to know is the man who ordered the genocide of the witches of Dathomir died of a heart attack on their burial grounds. There would be no plotting, no stand against the Jedi, just a simple Republic-wide mourning for the loss of their heroic Chancellor. Maul from this incident would learn to forgive the Jedi. His aspirations for something greater in the galaxy slowly dissipated, and instead, he focused on being a good brother to Savage and Ventress. They defeated the Sith together. The monster of their collective suffering had been destroyed by them, and while the Jedi didn't necessarily kill Palpatine themselves, it was because of the Jedi that the last of the Sith was to be defeated. Due to Maul actually having his great mother, he would listen to her advice about becoming a Sisyphus in the galaxy. He could have a full life, he didn't need to suffer, and because he had his brother and sister, he would commit himself to being one with them, a true Dathomiri. This resolve went similarly for both Asajj and Savage. However, Ventress was more committed to the Night Sister clan, because she and Maul were not quite as close to siblings as Maul and Oppress were. Outside of the relations on Dathomir, the collapse of both governmental faces offered a chance for reconciliation, and a chance to pass the blame. Due to some individuals turning on each other, most notably Goon Sam of the Techno Union, the Republic and Confederacy agreed to demonize the banking clans, Kaminoans, Trade Federation, and Geonosian Industrial Complex. These four major conglomerates would be seen as the architects of the war. Without Palpatine, Dooku, or these major players pulling the strings, it was impossible for war to continue. The Techno Union would make out like a bandit, and because of their efforts to turn people against the other groups, they shifted some of their own industrial prowess to avoid detection, because both governments would agree to run extensive checks and balances on every major business player in the galaxy, which ironically also included the Jedi. The peace, as a result, would not be a reunification. It would be three separate governments in the galaxy: the Neutral, the Confederacy, and the Republic. It wouldn't be entirely ideal, but there was room for growth and a chance for true galactic peace. Eventually, they would be brought back together, but for now, weeding out the corruption was the name of the game. Master Windu and the Jedi Order, on the other hand, would maintain a tight relationship with the Dathomiri. They would sometimes have Zabrak or Night Sister Jedi, but they weren't especially tight with each other. There was a foundational respect that saved the galaxy from never-ending war, and in destroying the Sith. They both helped each other in some way, shape, or form, and that's all that needed to be said about it. Maul wouldn't ever make amends with Kenobi, but they would speak once more when Obi-Wan was sent to Dathomir to bring a new student to the Jedi Temple, one handpicked by Mother Talzin. It wasn't an especially pleasant interaction, but Maul and Obi-Wan were both able to agree that they had both taken something from the other. They might as well let it go and move on with their own lives, which they wouldn't. Plus, Maul had actually found his belonging. He had his brotherhood with Savage, which he adored more than anything. He had his sister, Ventress, who he absolutely loved. Eventually, Maul and Savage would have their own families in the Dathomiri traditions, and live out their lives without the strain or torment of the Sith, nor the rambunctiousness of galactic politics or dealings. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to the patrons for supporting the channel. If you guys want more Brotherhood, but Brotherhood that actually falls apart, I just made a video for Transformers 1 on my cinema channel. Go check that out. I did a very deep analysis on D16 and Orion packs. Otherwise, let's talk about this specific story. The Battle of Dathomir and finding Maul are kind of inversed in this scenario. Maul is found earlier, and that's really the only way this works, because he's found after the entire massacre. So I really wanted to make sure I conveyed that he struggled a lot with his fighting, and that's why these duels don't go by as quickly. These duels are gritty and painful because Maul is coming back into his own, Savage is not fully trained yet, and Ventress is kind of carrying things. So it's really difficult, and Dooku is an insane duelist. I think he'd be really talented regardless of the status that he was in during this video. I thought it'd be interesting to put Dooku into a haze after the whole assassination attempt, suggesting that the ritual that Talzin did affected him later on, potentially even leading to him having those inverse effects that we see in Revenge of the Sith. But more or less, I wanted to have this unity. You always see like these big three players, and Maul and Asajj I don't think ever interact with each other, at least on screen. And so having the three big Dathomiri individuals interact with each other and actually become like siblings was really integral to making this work. I really like the idea of them just becoming best friends and siblings, and it kind of replaces the loss of Farrell, because Savage murdered him. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed. A little bit wholesome, a lot of action, but I love you all, spread the love, and always, remember my friends, may the Force be with you. Guru guru guru. Guru guru guru.